Hi, I'm Ravi.
And I'm Shell,
and you're listening to Two Lost Souls,
the podcast that guides you through the journey to becoming a CBT therapist.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever and wherever you are listening. Welcome to the Two Lost Souls podcast. The title of today's episode is Accreditation, Accreditation, Accreditation. My name is Ravi Amrith, and in today's show, we will be discussing the all-important things to consider when applying for BABCP accreditation. But let me begin by saying that this is your podcast guide to surviving a high-intensity CBT course. We pride ourselves on creating a safe space for trainees, qualified therapists, and those who are generally curious. Honesty is our policy, and we tell it how we see it, but we'd love to hear your views too. As usual, I'm joined in the therapy room today by the superb Michelle Sudbury. How's it going, Michelle?
Yeah, it's really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you as well. Good news this week, actually. I've actually graduated from the high intensity CBT course. Thank you very much. So I can officially remove the word trainee from my email signatures, and I can, feel a little bit more worried about my practice for a bit before I fully get the training wheels off.
Well done, you. It's a big thing.
Thank you very much. It does feel like a new chapter, which is both exciting and daunting at the same time. But before we move on with the rest of the episode today, let me just remind all the listeners out there that if you have any particular questions or topics that you'd like to see covered in Two Lost Souls, reach out to us on Twitter at TLS_pod or by email at twolostsoulspodcast@gmail.com. So today is a very exciting episode for us, Shell, not only because this is the last episode that we're going to record before Christmas. Merry Christmas, by the way. But this is our first episode where we are joined by a guest. We have the pleasure of being joined by Sarah Lack. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist and BABCP accredited, so CBT trained. And I work in a clinical psychology training program, but I also work in a clinical team delivering CBT, not an IAPT. And I also teach on a CBT diploma at a different part of the university. So I've got kind of three relevant roles really to kind of talk about today.
Okay, amazing. And the other thing that you are quite passionate about when we have spoken off air in the past is about accreditation as well. And I suppose knowing that lots of our listeners are going to be at the stage of their courses where this is something where they might need to start thinking about accreditation at the end of the process. Do you have any, I suppose, any hints or tips, first of all, for people who maybe have one eye on that at the moment as for what they might need to do when they get to that stage?
I think you've mentioned it in a previous podcast, but like logging everything. Yes. even if you don't use the kind of official paperwork, but using whatever works for you to log all your clinical contacts, all your supervision, all your sort of self-directed study that's CBT related, and that can include reading papers and working through your reference lists in preparation for whatever academic work you need to do. But it can also be attending conferences and listening to the podcasts like this. So just making a note of all of that really, and getting as much supervision as you can. It doesn't always just have to be that weekly or fortnightly one-to-one, the university group supervision, but also you might be going to some peer supervision, or you might be going to your kind of workplace. There's other opportunities for supervision. So it all adds up, and it all helps argue your case really for when you're applying for that provisional accreditation with the BABCP, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. Well, knowing and just, I suppose, from my perspective, as I was going through the training, I think the accreditation side of it actually almost remained this sort of end mystery goal at the end of it, where actually a lot about it didn't seem that clear as we were going through the process. I suppose a question for both of you, really, what does the landscape look like at the moment in terms of, I mean, what is accreditation first of all, and also um, why should someone become accredited?
I suppose from an IAPT perspective, I'll come at it from that angle because that's obviously where I work. I think, firstly, accreditation will almost kind of prove your level of competency. It will kind of demonstrate that you have the required skill to be, able to work in that field, and that you've proven that you can do that through a series of evidences. So I think it is really important. And within an IAP service, I encourage all the trainees that I work with or supervise, or who come into the team, to apply for their provisional accreditation as soon as they qualify, because the process gets easier if you do that. The longer you leave it, the more information you have to accrue, and then you have to evidence. So do it straight away. You've just completed a course. You've got a plethora of information and evidence. So use it. Don't waste it. Many IAP services now are requiring you to be accredited, because it supports the banding that you come in at. Back in the day, you would qualify, you would come in at a band 6, you would work a couple of years as a band 6, prove your worth, and then, if you were fortunate enough to be offered a band 7 position, you could apply for it and be moved up. But actually, I don't know if this is good or bad, but most newly qualifieds can go straight into a band 7 job now, which is great for them, and their pay packets. But also services kind of want to see that you're worth what we're paying you. So starting that accreditation process, I think it proves that you're serious about your role, that you're committing to it, and you're signing up to a set of a kind of set of rules for how you're going to work. So that's from an IAP perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, I completely agree, Shell. But also, it's important for our patients, the populations that we serve, really, to know that we've been trained to a certain standard, and it's really easy for them to look up what does BABCP accreditation actually mean, and see there's minimum training standards. I mean, I'm not saying everyone would, but and I think it's a really good kind of benchmark for people to kind of trust. And actually, at band 7, lots of people, in my experience anyway, lots of people are employed at band 7 and they haven't got as good training as a level 2 BABCP accredited CBT diploma, or even if it's not accredited, they've got some very patchy bits of training that don't really add up to anything cohesive, and they really struggle to assess, formulate, and intervene from an evidence-based perspective and in their roles, if they've got a kind of mental health role. So I think having that CBT training and then having that accreditation kind of stamp of approval is really, really well deserved, and just get it. I mean, I know it's a bit expensive, and we can kind of come on to fees and things, but any profession comes with some extra costs in terms of your own sort of professional indemnities and registrations, but I think it's well worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we can probably move on to those costs straight away. I think, Sarah, because anyone who has potentially recently qualified, or who sort of keeps their finger on the pulse with what's going on with the BABCP at the moment, will know that fees have gone up in terms of the accreditation process. do you think, I mean, particularly now knowing that we're going through a pretty tough time in terms of cost of living, etc., do you think accreditation still represents sort of good value for money?
Well, I mean, I think this is a contentious issue, isn't it? And not obviously. But I think the initial cost for provisional accreditation is quite a sizable, amount. But then once you become fully accredited, it comes right down again to something much more affordable. I think like £65 a year. Just kind of running to keep your running membership and your access to journals and your magazine and just generally your status. So I think it is affordable in the long run, but there are a few upfront costs that are a bit difficult to swallow, especially at the moment. Yeah, what do you think?
I think it was £65 a year for your reaccreditation, I think, and I believe that's gone up to around 89.
Oh, really? Gosh, yeah,
something like that. So it has gone up quite a large amount. The value for money question, that's a really good point. And you mentioned access to journals and things, which is true, that those are really valuable resources. I don't know if that's slowed down a little bit in the last few years. We actually had a really interesting discussion at work just a few days ago about the amount of research that's happening within CBT at the moment. And it does appear to have slowed down quite a bit since COVID, understandably, I suppose. So I'm not sure that we're getting the amount of new research that we used to expect and have. So hopefully that will pick back up. And then I agree, I think it probably is quite good value for money in that respect, because that is a very valuable resource, isn't it?
And I know that the cost of provisional accreditation basically covers the cost of the accreditation liaison officer to pore through your form and check all your evidence. And it normally takes them quite a long time. So if you think of, I don't know, what is it, £180? I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. I think that's right. Yeah, something
but it's probably a day's work for them, really. And then if there's problems with it, they don't get any extra money for liaising with that applicant and asking for the extra stuff. So it can kind of become how long is a piece of string. So I can kind of understand why that they need to cover their costs for that. But it's not great timing to increase fees at the moment. It really isn't.
No, we went along to the was it the AGM? Yeah,
it was the pre-AGM.
The pre-AGM, yeah, to kind of discuss the increase in fees. And I think they recognise that the timing's not great, but it does fall in with their application for accreditation. So the BABCP are obviously going to apply for registration with the PSA, Ravi.
Yeah, PSA, Professional Standards Authority, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they kind of justified the increase in costs there.
Yeah. I haven't even heard of them though. So I mean maybe it really counts somewhere along the line to stakeholders then. I mean, I also know that because of the expansion of both high intensity CBT courses, but also clinical psychology training courses that they're going to be BABCP accredited, they're going to get a lot more members. So their income is going to be bigger anyway, because there's going to be a lot more accredited people around. So I was sort of assuming they would, enjoy that extra income that way rather than increasing the fees. But who am I to say? What do I know?
It's a good point, though. It's a very good point.
Yeah. Well, I think, Shell, you said they justified the kind of increase in fees. I might take a bit more of a hardline and controversial view on that, and I'll say I think they attempted to justify their views on it. And I'm not sure whether they sort of successfully did that, but I suppose it's one of those things where people haven't really been given a choice with it, and I suppose it's the only thing people can do really is vote with their feet. And when they're trying to build an association of people that are kind of going to be the be all and end all when it comes to CBT standards in the UK, I'm guessing people only have one way to walk in that sense, really.
Yeah.
Looking at the other side of that, though, I mean, you spoke about clinical psychology trainees as well. Just thinking about those people who would go on to complete their doctorates, for example, and they'd need to sort of maintain accreditation or registration with things like the HCPC and the BPS, and would then sort of need this or potentially could use this on top of that. What would you tell them to sort of incentivize them getting accreditation with the BABCP?
I would say that I think that more and more it's going to become one of those desired / essential items on job descriptions and person specifications. It's not at the moment, but I think once there's been a few cohorts that have graduated from these vastly expanded doctorate courses, there's going to be a lot more kind of clout really for employers to say you must be BABCP accredited. And I think the driver from that is coming from the NHS long-term plan, isn't it? Where there's a section in that says that all psychological professionals should have kind of explicit evidence-based training and accreditation in those trainings, not just CBT, but family therapy, systemic therapy as well, EMDR, things like that. So I think it's probably going to be something that might give you the edge over another candidate in the future. I also think that it's kind of helps you to move forward in your career if you want to become more of a supervisor or a trainer. I'm not just thinking about clinical psychologists. I think there's a lot more opportunities for CBT therapists than ever before to seek those kinds of leadership opportunities. And I think if you're BABCP accredited, again, that's going to give you a bit more of an edge. It's something that that stakeholders and commissioners are really looking for.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, modelling that, if you're sitting, kind of higher up in the food chain, and then you need to model this to the therapists that are coming through and show its value, I guess, don't you? So I think you're right. It will give you the edge at interview. It's definitely something we factor in when we're recruiting. So I think it's already there. We're already looking at it. I don't know if we would actively shortlist somebody who wasn't accredited and applying for a role where we had accredited people applying. So
yeah, in an IAPT service, it's more of a given, isn't it? But
absolutely, yeah.
Other community mental health teams where people don't even know what BABCP accreditation is yet.
That's true.
But they're really learning quickly, and that we're having kind of documents and expectations sent to us from high going, how many people in your service are BABCP accredited? How many people are going on to accredited courses? How many people are being trained up in enhanced CBT for psychosis or for personality disorders? And the expectations seem to be coming down the line, and we'll need to meet those expectations in community mental health teams, but also there's new teams, one of which I work for, which are supposed to bridge primary and secondary care, so bridge between IAPT and community mental health teams.
Oh wow, okay, that's very valuable.
Serious mental illness, and again, we need to provide evidence-based therapies, and we need to provide them in a kind of flexible way that perhaps doesn't necessarily fit into the remit of the IAPT service model. And I think you've talked about that before on your podcast, haven't you, about how sometimes IAPT has to fit into the shape that's there rather than do what it's sort of set out to do and let its staff deliver what they've been trained to deliver. And I think finally, maybe I'm being a bit too hopeful, but finally there does seem to be this movement called the transformation agenda, which is seeking to integrate primary and secondary services a lot better for patients who perhaps wouldn't necessarily have their needs met in IAPT, and perhaps wouldn't necessarily have their needs met in CMHTs either. This kind of step 3.5 group,
absolutely,
called that. And I think I'm hoping that there'll be more. There will definitely be more jobs for that. There's a huge push on increasing the workforce for that bit. I've heard that apparently there's not going to be much of a primary care, secondary care divide in the future, that the vision is that it's just either community mental health or urgent and inpatient mental health.
Right.
And it's going to, the sort of divide between primary and secondary is going to be, they're going to try and kind of remove that. And I've no idea how long that will take, or which parts of the country will be able to move forward with that more quickly than others. But BABCP accreditation is integral to all of that, because it's about, again, providing consistent, reliable care for people with serious mental health problems.
Yeah, it does begin to kind of standardise it across the country, doesn't it? I think, and again, from a patient perspective, that is going to help deliver more consistent care. We often hear of people who have had one experience at one end of the country and a completely different experience at the other end of the country because of the way services are aligned and they work together. And it can't continue like that. We need to be able to offer consistent and supportive care to everybody. So I do think that will go some way towards it. And I really hope that comes in soon.
Yeah.
We need it. Yeah.
I mean, also, there's a lot of, well, I don't know if a lot, but, IAP doesn't always have a brilliant reputation in secondary and specialist mental health services, and I think it's so unfair, because I'm talking, saying you, because I know you both work there, but, you're having to deal with a really unwieldy sort of population with so many different needs, and they don't necessarily fit into step 2 and step 3 very well.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to have high dropouts if you're trying to meet the needs of that very, very diverse population. So, I think you get a bad press sometimes, and I feel like one of my roles is to kind of advocate for IAP, because I know what good work you do. But yeah, we need to kind of make IAP services do what they were setting out to do in the first place.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear, because it's true, and we do feel a little bit under the cosh sometimes, I think, but we do get bad press, but we aren't working in IAP services at the moment, unfortunately. We are trying to deliver IAPT care, or IAP level care, and work at step 2 and step 3, but we're working at step 3 and step 3.5. So our lovely PWP teams are dealing with more risk, more complexity. Our high intensity teams are dealing with a lot more risk and complexity that we're not trained to work with in most cases. And where we do need that specialist support and the intensive support that we can't provide within a 12 to 18 model session model. So it is really nice to hear that's recognised, because we don't hear that a lot. We just hear the bad stuff. So yeah,
because those are the patients who go back to their GP, or who the CMHT doesn't know what to do with either, and they're the ones that say, well, IAP didn't help me. Well, no, because IAP wasn't designed to help somebody with your level of need.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, there are people out there. I'm not the only one who recognise that.
Thank you.
Well, that was definitely very affirming to hear, and I think just as you were talking there, both of you, I mean, it struck me that particularly PWPs, as you mentioned, Shell, they tend to bear a lot of the brunt of this, because they're kind of the unofficial front door a lot of the time, in terms of the first port of call for these people. They're generally referred either by their GP with a 2 to 3 word referral, or alternatively they're signposted by their GP as just the general, these people will help you. And I think sometimes it's a big ask of them, particularly as low intensity CBT therapists, to kind of have an overall vision and actually be able to kind of have a bird's eye view of the entire mental health landscape and make a call as to whether not only something fits within their service, but which service as a whole within the entire landscape that someone would fit into, which I think is a big challenge. Just in terms of bringing us back to accreditation and that side of things, just a query that I had as someone who's relatively new on this journey. What's the difference between accreditation and re-accreditation? So I know you spoke earlier about a top tip for accreditation being sort of record keeping and making sure you had all the I's dotted and T's crossed in terms of records, etc., to prove the work that you've done. What's the difference between the two processes?
I mean, it just gets easier and easier. Basically, the hardest mountain to climb or hurdle to jump over is to get that provisional accreditation and get that letter back from the BABCB going, we approve your provisional accreditation. That's the time to pop the champagne, because you're on the home run then. And then for that next 12 months, all you need to do is keep your CBT practice going, keep receiving supervision from a CBT trained supervisor. They don't even have to be BABCP accredited at the moment, although it helps. They do need to be CBT trained. That only needs to be once a month, even if you're full-time. And you need to keep your CPD going, but you'd have to do that anyway to maintain your other kind of professional registration. So it's really much easier that those 12 months, as long as you're carrying on working, you're going to get your full accreditation, which you do have to apply for, but it's a much easier form after that 12 months. If you go on mat leave or if you have some kind of sick leave, you can send them a form to say that you're going to be not in practice for a certain number of months, and they'll just press pause. So when you come back, you can just pick up where you left off. That's not the case if you haven't got your provisional yet. If you go off and have a baby, or if you're ill, you've got to start all the way from that the beginning of your 12 months again when you get back. Not necessarily with your training, but certainly with your supervision and your clinical hours. So it's really, really great to get the provisional under your belt. And then once you've got full accreditation, again, it's even easier, isn't it, Shell? You just have to basically just tick a box. They send you an email, you click on a link, you tick a box and you press submit and you pay your fees. Yeah,
you pay your fees. Really you declare, don't you? Just make your declaration, and that's it. You've got another 12 months, and you're all sorted. Unless you get called to prove your CPD and things like that. But that's never happened to me yet. Have you ever had to go through that?
No. I think even when you do, it's actually really easy to evidence. Because you can just, especially if you keep your supervision logs. Even if you don't, you can cobble them together retrospectively because you've got your supervision in your diary. You can just quickly cobble together 12 months of monthly supervision and ping that off. I really think that it's that initial hurdle, and then it's fine. But I do hear of people letting their accreditation lapse, and then they really regret it. I don't know because it's really hard to get reaccredited again.
I've never let mine lapse, but I've also heard of somebody who had. And it came to light a few years after, and she had to go through the whole process again, and it caused a lot of stress in her life. So it's not something I would be wanting to do. Just keep it going. Once it's there, you've done the hard work. You're absolutely right. That first one is difficult, but once it's done, and the rest of it then is much more simple. You might as well just keep it going.
Got you. So the main takeaways from this so far is to get the provisional accreditation done as early as you can. And once you've got that accreditation or that registration, you just maintain it while you can. Okay.
And then you can start aiming towards becoming an accredited supervisor. I haven't filled in that form yet. It's been on my to-do list for about 2 or 3 years. Hasn't yet come up in my appraisals, but I'm sure it will eventually. I don't think that's going to be nearly as hard as evidencing provisional accreditation, but there is, you've got to have a certain number, you've got to be providing a certain amount of supervision per month and attending supervision regularly, and you've got to prove that you've taught a certain number of hours of CBT. So, there's something more to aspire to.
Yeah, I've not kind of delved into that either yet. I've just settled with what I've got for now. But definitely in the future it might be something I look at, because again, it's kind of quite nice to have to your name as well, isn't it? And if it gives you a bit of an edge when you're applying for jobs. So clinical supervisors are being employed within IAP services to just provide supervision. So it would give you a bit of an edge over other applicants, perhaps. So it might be a nice thing to look into.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thinking about that for some listeners who we have who might be just starting their journeys, as it were, in terms of CBT and high intensity practice, and maybe thinking in the long term that there's maybe a school of thought, and some people that I've spoken to have expressed this thought that supervising is quite a daunting thing to do, in terms of I've only just got my training wheels at this point. I'm not sure, what I'm going to do in the future. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to sort of advise anyone else on what to do. What is your advice to anyone like that in terms of the long-term view and the opportunities that might present themselves?
Well, Shell, what was it like when they asked you to start supervising?
I was really keen to get going with it. So I asked if I could go on the supervisor's course as soon as I qualified. I was told no. Have a year, settle in, and then come back to us. And that's what I did. It's my most favourite bit of my job. I love it. I love working with both qualified and trainees, but trainees in particular. I think it's such a valuable and privileged thing to get to offer. And I know that sounds a little bit soppy, but it is. You see trainees, particularly when they're very vulnerable, anxious, and you get to guide and support in a way that you don't get to do in other roles that you might have within the team. So I love it. I really love it. I think it keeps my practice fresh. I learn a lot from supervisees, which I suppose selfishly I really like, because it keeps me up to date, keeps me current, keeps me interested. I want to go off and learn new things because I want to both share with supervisees, but also kind of feel equipped so that if they come to me, I'm not embarrassed because I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So I really love it. It is my favourite bit of my job.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've said. And when I sort of put myself out there to start supervising, I was just, it was the classic imposter syndrome that you never goes away. You just learn to live with it, don't you? But I was just like, oh dear, these people are, I might be more experienced in CBT than them, but they've worked in the NHS a lot longer than me, and they've got other training that I don't have, and they're seeing a population, so my first supervisor role was working with people in a perinatal mental health team, and I'd never worked in that before. So I was just like, what have I got to offer? But actually I did, they really, really appreciated some proper kind of, going through formulations and, all those core skills really come into play. And then, like you said, Shell, learning from them as well, learning about mothers and babies was fascinating for me in that early role. And then since then, some of my supervisees are just amazing. What they do, what they manage to complete every week, the kinds of complexity that they're dealing with, and the pain and suffering that their clients, it's just, it's a real privilege to be that person that therapist comes to for their psychological safety, and to get that sort of nurture and reassurance, and you're doing a great job. Let's think about this together. You're not on your own. It's a really, really satisfying role.
Oh, I completely agree. You said that beautifully. Completely agree.
It's really it's like doing CBT with a client that's just made for CBT, often supervising, because your supervisor knows what to expect. If you've trained them up well and if you've worked together on a good contract and they know what's expected of them, they come fully prepared, or at least they seem to. and it's a dream. Occasionally there's going to be conflicts and ruptures and difficulties that arise, but again, that's all part of the learning, and I've really appreciated learning from slightly more tricky supervision relationships that I've had, where maybe the supervisee has extra needs that I didn't at first know about, or maybe they're having a really tough time with a colleague, and so I've had to kind of use my supervision to kind of learn how to navigate that. And again, that just builds on your own leadership competencies and your confidence really as an experienced professional.
That was a really good point. I'm hoping so, particularly given that I mentioned earlier on that some of this has come from hearing other colleagues or other fellow trainees kind of going, I would be really daunted about becoming a supervisor. I think that's definitely imbued me with a sense of confidence and inspiration, to the point where, Michelle, you might see an email tomorrow morning asking me to go on the next supervisor course. I'm already preparing myself for the no, given that I've just qualified, but just so you know that email
and
will be there.
CBT therapists will make such good supervisors to other professions. So again, I'm very much here coming from a non-IAPT perspective, and your skills are so needed in other mental health teams. So I really hope that there'll be more opportunities for CBT therapists to take clinical supervisor roles outside of IAPT as well. There certainly seem to be at the moment. I don't know what the landscape will be over the next few years. But I really hope so, because you've got so much to offer.
Definitely. Well, you've got me thinking just there, actually, Sarah, in terms of, we've obviously spoken a lot about healthcare, and we know that the high intensity training model and everything in this sort of ecosystem is geared towards placing people in IAPT. But we've also spoken a lot today about careers that can exist outside that system as well. Do you think there's also a place for CBT therapists almost sometimes outside healthcare in general as well, in terms of just having those sort of reflective skills and those supervisory skills that could lend themselves to other sort of businesses and domains as well, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, I don't want to be saying, "Oh, go and spend thousands of HCE money and then leave and become like an entrepreneur," because that's not in line with my values. But yeah, I mean, what's wrong with working part-time for the NHS and then part-time doing something else? I think that's really good work-life balance, actually. And yeah, there's so many transferable skills in that kind of contracting, in that collaboration, in that even the kind of even that sort of behavioral experiment stuff, and that curiosity is really useful in the business domain. And just general being psychologically aware is in itself a really powerful leadership quality. And I think absolutely that would be really, really lapped up in other settings, definitely.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to echo what you said there as well, I think about the sort of HEE stuff. One thing that I think we're keen to do on the show is obviously acknowledge that IAPT does some great things, and it's really nice to be able to follow that pathway actually after you've finished the course and after you've applied for after you apply for pre-accreditation, all that stuff, to continue working in an IAPT service. But I think it's really important to consider that wider landscape as well, and understand that you're right. I think life can also sometimes be made of a variety of puzzle pieces in a way. And I think having a bit of mix and match across your week of different settings to work in, I think is an important thing to consider as well. Is there anything else we kind of need to add on the sort of accreditation side of things, do you think?
I don't know whether I made the point enough earlier, really, which is just it will become more and more valid and important, I think, as the NHS long-term plan is rolled out and actualised. And maybe don't even stop at one. Maybe go and get your secondary accreditation. That's what it's called, secondary accreditation, because it's that kind of high intensity, that sort of level 2, specialist. You've got specialist skills in an evidence-based intervention. Why stop at CBT? Why don't you go and learn systemic therapy next?
Absolutely.
Well, just to round off the interview, I just want to say a big thank you to you, Sarah, not only for coming on the show, but also for being our first guest. Just as in a usual sort of CBT kind of way, how have you felt about your experience on the show today?
I've really enjoyed it, thanks. It's always nice talking to like-minded people, obviously, but I do think we've had a good discussion about some issues that are close to all of us really in our future careers, and it's just been a real pleasure to be on. I'm really grateful and kind of touched to be invited, and if I am your first guest, then hopefully it'll inspire others to join as well.
Hopefully so. And alongside that, Sarah, is there anywhere that people can sort of find you on social media or keep up to date with what you're doing or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn is probably the main one. So just look up Sarah Lack on LinkedIn.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And we'll hope to hopefully catch up again soon.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Shell, what a lovely interview that was with Sarah. I really enjoyed that. What did you think about it?
I really love her. So interesting, really great to have that other perspective and that other dynamic as well. I really enjoyed that discussion. And hopefully it's offered some really useful information to the people that we're trying to reach. So it will have done its job, but fabulous, really interesting lady.
Totally. And just to, I suppose, summarize my main takeaways from it, particularly at the point where I am in my journey, is to get the provisional accreditation done as soon as possible and make sure you maintain that accreditation rather than letting it lapse. What were your main takeaways from what we discussed?
I love how Sarah kind of really reiterated and brought that point home that although it feels a bit arduous that first year, the process is worth it, because once you've done it, reaccreditation is so much more simple than you expect it's going to be. And I think it's just something we should do. So we don't use shoulds a lot, do we, in CBT? But I think this is probably a should moment rather than a could.
Yes, Albert Ellis might have a word with you after that.
I don't mind. Bring it on.
Okay.
I stand by it.
Okay, got you. So just to round off today's episode of the show, if you have taken anything away from this episode of Two Lost Souls, please hit that subscribe button on your podcatcher of choice, or recommend us to your friends. And both of those things really mean a huge amount to us. Alternatively, if you're feeling generous, please feel free to donate to our Ko-fi at kofi.com/TLS_pod. Finally, if there's anything you'd like to see us discuss, or if you've got any feedback on the shows we've put out so far, please feel free to give us a follow and drop us a line at TLS_pod on Twitter, or at twolostsoulspodcast@gmail.com. All that's left, first of all, is to say a big thank you to Sarah Lack for being our guest for this episode and for that really enjoyable interview. To say a big thank you to all of you out there for listening, and a huge thank you to Shell.
Thanks, Ravi. And Ravi, I was going to say, because you don't really talk about it very often, but you're a bit of a musician, and I know that you've got a really great Christmas song, and it's that time of year. So I'm wondering, where could people hear that?
So people can hear my Christmas song. Some people out there will be like, what? I had no idea. This is true. This is sort of my secret double life that's now merging into my main life. You can search the song Mistletoe by Ravi Amrath on Spotify, Apple Music, Napster, if you're still in 1997, YouTube, anywhere you like, and that will play my Christmas song. Thank you very much.
And you could probably pop a link somewhere, couldn't you?
I could probably pop a link in the show notes.
Because you're quite clever. You could definitely do that, I reckon.
This is, well, I'm not going to own up to being clever, but I could put a link somewhere. Thank you very much for that. I will definitely plug that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to plug that as well.
That's good. It's a good song. I've heard it.
Oh, thank you very much. And just to end today's episode, rather than a groan-worthy joke from me, please enjoy this gem of humour from Sarah Lack.
So what is the favourite moment of Christmas for a mindfulness practitioner? The present moment?
Ooh.
I like that. I think that's my favourite joke we've ever had on the show. Thank you very much for that, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Two Lost Souls. Two Lost Souls was presented by Ravi Amrath and Michelle Sudbury. To get in touch, contact TLS_pod on Twitter or email twolostsoulspodcast@gmail.com.